What is going on, guys and gals? Brooklyn-bound the Raid Scientist here, and today I'm going to cover how to complete the Raid Challenge from the Deep Stone Crypt, Copies of Copies. If you like the video, a positive rating is greatly appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, click the subscribe button down below to get connected to the channel and get access to all of my Destiny guides. Now, the Raid Challenges rotate similarly as they've done in the past, with each week being a different challenge. This guide is for the Copies of Copies challenge, which is performed in the second encounter, Atraks-1. Successful completion of this challenge will award you double encounter chests with double loot, as well as the triumph required for the Descendant title for Deep Stone Crypt. Note, I'm going to already assume you know how to do this encounter normally here. If you need the details on how to perform this encounter in its entirety, check out my guide linked in the description and click on the timestamp for Atraks-1. So, let's jump into how this is done. The Copies of Copies challenge requires that you do not dispose of any of the Atraks-1 replication buffs in the airlocks at all. If you attempt to dispose any of the buffs, the challenge will fail once the airlock closes. Recall that the Atraks replication buff, or debuff, drops after you do a damage phase to any of the Atraks replications. Picking it up will give the holder a 45-second timer. If the timer reaches 0, the player dies and the Atraks replication will pop out and wipe you. So, remember that this is where the operator comes into play, as they will be shooting the floating purple buffs above everyone's head, and doing so will reset the timer and requires the player to reacquire it by picking it back up off the ground. So, the operator has the hardest job in this encounter because they need to constantly keep resetting everyone's replication buffs so they don't reach 0 on their timers. This can get quite complex when you get 4 or more players juggling buffs because everyone is moving around, and when you reset, the buff drops on the ground and they have to sometimes go find it. So, you really don't want to not one phase this boss to complete this challenge. And by one phase, I mean a total of 4 damage cycles, 2 up and 2 down, which will grant a total of 4 Atraks replication buffs. While it is totally doable to not one phase him and still finish, you are going to be juggling the buffs for a very long time, as well as introducing a 5th and maybe 6th buff if your damage is too low. So, you should set your team up to maximize damage and get this done in one phase, aka 4 damage cycles. To do this, you want to stack Well of Radiance or Bubble with Weapons of Light on both the top floor and bottom floor teams before damaging to increase your damage output. It's good to also have a way to debuff the boss too. Melting Point on Titan works great, and Tether from Hunters isn't bad either, but be careful to only tether the correct Atraks copy. For weapons, remember that you definitely want to use swords here, aka the Lament, and stack sword mods as well, like Lucent Blade and Taking Charge, to do even more damage. Be sure you are doing the heavy attack properly. If you don't have the Lament, Falling Guillotine is the next best bet, but just go finish the Lament quest, please. It takes like 2 hours, and you'll thank me later. If you're still having trouble killing him in 4 damage rotations, aka one phase, then you may need to get creative with having some extra players come up top and then quickly use the pods to travel back and forth to get extra damage in. If you don't one phase him, you'll need all 4 players with the replications to hang out in space with the operator, who will be resetting the buffs constantly as the servitors respawn and you clear them out. This means that whichever one player who isn't carrying a replication at this time and isn't the operator may have to go down to the crypt to clear out the servitors by themselves to start the next round of damage. Also keep in mind that if you are struggling with DPS and needing more phases, you do not necessarily have to have one replication buff held per person. You could, in theory, have a few players juggle multiple replications. Remember that when the replication is reset by the operator, the timer resets immediately as it falls on the floor. That timer keeps ticking while the replication orb is sitting on the floor, and when it's picked up, the timer doesn't reset again. So in theory, you could have a player who is holding one replication and another one lying on the floor. And when they have the one they are holding reset, they can then pick up the other one, and literally keep repeating this. While it is possible to do this, It isn't ideal because it does limit your positioning on the map, as you would have to keep going back to the orb on the ground. However, in a pinch, you can use this strategy to keep the replications alive if you have a player needing to go down or if you run out of revive tokens or something. Ultimately, whatever collection of player locations, buffs, and debuffs you're using to damage Atraks, just remember that you have to juggle the purple buffs that are dropped after damage, and you cannot dispose of them in the airlocks. Any player in the down below team that grabs a replication buff needs to take a trip up to space because the operator will be up in space refreshing them. If you are the operator, call out before you shoot someone's replication buff to reset it. This way they don't drop it without knowing. And if you're holding a replication buff, communicate when you have about 10 seconds left on your timer so the operator can reset you. Finally, as the operator, remember to not get too close to the players carrying the replications when you reset them, because when they drop on the ground, you may accidentally pick it up. If you have a weapon with ricochet rounds, you can shoot it off of yourself if you find a good way to bounce the shots off a wall, but ultimately, it's better to just stay away. Keep juggling the buffs throughout the damage cycles and until final stand, and then ultimately killing Atraks. And you'll be rewarded with the triumph and an extra chest. Best of luck in getting this done, Guardians. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments section and I'll be sure to answer them. And if you come up with another strategy that I haven't covered, also let me know so I can pin it to the top of the comments. Thanks for watching and supporting me, and we only have a few challenges left, so keep an eye on the channel for new content once those are finished. As a friendly reminder, please also follow me on Twitter at BrooklynBound1 and on Twitch at BrooklynBound to get connected with me in real time and to see when I'm streaming. And until next time, Guardians, best of luck.